Pornography is a big problem, and it's wrecking lives, it's wrecking relationships.
If you know you have arousal dysfunction, it's coming from your brain.
Literally, dads are inadvertently exposing their little children to explicit material.
This is a dopamine dependency we're talking about.
When the internet started coming out, porn started becoming a bigger problem.
Porn's highly addictive.
How is it affecting the marriage? How is it affecting the kids?
You must rewire your brain.
Gentlemen, welcome to the Formidable Family Man podcast. I'm your host, Greg Denning. Today, my guest is Dr. Trish Leigh, and I am crazy excited about this conversation because pornography is a big problem, and it's wrecking lives, it's wrecking relationships, and Dr. Leigh has spent a lot of time in this space, studying, researching, working with people, and so we're going to deep dive into all of this, and we're going to tease out some of the arguments of like, oh, well, no, it's only one side that's saying it's bad, and others are saying it's perfectly okay, and it depends on your paradigm. Like, we're gonna dig into this, and particularly, what I'm most excited about, and this is what your specialty is, how it affects the brain and the mind, and therefore the life. So, Dr. Trish, thank you for being here. Why don't you start with kind of telling us your story and how you ended up where you are and the work you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me because I am on a mission to help people understand the neurological ramifications, but most importantly, how that affects their lives. So how did I get into it? The good old fashioned way. It fell in my lap with someone that I care about. I figured out that they were addicted to pornography, and it explained everything. And I actually have a book out. It's called Mind Over Explicit Matter. I tell the story in my book of not only my friend's journey, but my journey also. So it's all there, the ins and outs of it. But, basically I was already kind of perfectly poised educationally, even though I wasn't focusing my work on pornography. I was set up to be able to do that. So I have many degrees. I focus on neuroscience and how it plays out in the mind. But when this happened, I went and I studied under the leading sex addiction recovery professionals in the country, and then I pivoted all my work into porn, and I've been doing that ever since. And it's about a decade.
That's amazing. Well, I love that journey. It's like it was a pain point. And she's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to look for solutions here. We're going to get in and kudos to you. I love that kind of approach. It's like, let's find out what's actually happening and what
Absolutely.
Can be done about
like anybody who knows me knows that's how I am. Like,
yeah.
I was fascinated by it because it is fascinating. And if it wasn't for the direct impact on my life, I would simply find it fascinating. But because of that, and actually we can talk about many other things that have unfolded. I'm the mom of 5 children, young adults. So we can talk about, there's been many other ways that it's impacted my family since then in terms of pornography use and how that plays out in social media use, how that plays out in interactions between men and women. But anyway, like I was terrified, because at first I'm like, this is crazy, all these working parts and how this is a deep dive situation. It is not a shallow end. I always tell people this is a deep end. If you think you're dealing with a shallow end issue, very wrong. So when I figured that out, my brain lit up, but then I'm like, I have to help. And my friend, I wasn't perfectly poised. I was set up to be perfectly poised when this happened to my friend. So I referred him to a sex addiction recovery professional. He spent tens of thousands of dollars and got worse. And I tell the story in the book. By the time it really came back to me that he was wasting all this money and getting worse, I was completely set up. No joke, 4 months later, he was well on his way to success. And that's the program. I didn't have a program at that time. I started a YouTube channel. This is a cool story. I'll tell you the short version. I've always had for a long time, I've had a YouTube channel where I talk about brain stuff. So, I didn't tell anybody that I'm working on porn. It's literally still called Passion Project on my Google Drive. So I started focusing on porn, researching it, training. I told my husband, I go, I'm into something I don't think you're going to like. Would you like me to share it with you? And he's like, no, because he knew he'd probably shut me down. So I did that for 6 months. And then I told him on New Year's Day. But in the meantime, I put out one video on a different YouTube channel. It says nothing. It's like 2 minutes and 16 seconds long. It says, don't watch porn. Porn damages your brain. Stop watching porn. And then I get a notification, your video's been viewed 2 million times or something like that. All my videos were getting 300 views, So I'm like, what video? I go into the original channel. There's no video there with a lot of views. Then I'm like, it's the porn video. I go over
Wow.
there and check, and there's comments from people. Please make more videos.
Wow.
So by the time I saw that, that was like 3 months after I posted the first video, I started making consistent content. And I really attribute really the hard pivot in my work to those first people on that YouTube channel. Because if it wasn't such positive feedback and it wasn't asking for more help, if it would have been negative, it might have shut me down because I was leery at that point if I
Right.
should go into this just for my own personal sake. But I started making consistent content, and then I made a program based out of my work with my friend and what I was learning under these professionals. And I started putting it out on YouTube, and there's 2,000 videos with solution-oriented,
Yes.
brain hacks there.
Yes. Oh, I love it. This is so awesome. Oh, thanks for
Yeah.
doing that. Okay, so let's first off, how big of a problem is it? Is there a percentage about of people
Epidemic.
who are,
Epidemic.
or
Yeah.
how many boys and men are viewing it? Women? Like let's quick touch on
Okay.
how big is the
Yep.
problem?
Okay, so obviously it's difficult to nail down because the only way we study things are by the people who are willing to admit it. So, there has to be a caveat. But in my book, they actually made me take references out. They're like, you don't need to cite this. There was like 385 references. But my point about that is there is a lot of the scientific studies in there. But one that we can go off of is that the majority of people, 95% of people between the ages of 8 and 85 consume porn. Yeah, let that set in. Let that set in. Because now the age of exposure was at around 10 or 11. Age of exposure is down to 8 because kids have phones in their pocket. You Google something you didn't mean to, or actually if dads are on the IP address. I just made a video about this that's coming out on my YouTube channel. If dads are on that IP address at night before bed consuming porn, little Jimmy is served something not necessarily porn proper, but things that are explicit matter, as I call
Right.
it, the
Right.
next morning because the IP address is what's tracked, not the individual. And there's
Wow.
actually laws that can't track what kids are viewing. Thus, the parents, if it's channels that are for young people, that's not tracked. So anyways,
So wait, hold on. I got to emphasize that literally dads are inadvertently exposing their little children to explicit
yes,
material.
yes.
Man, how, because my message is that all the time. It's like, Dad, our habits are being distilled on our children. And this is a specific example of a dad searching. Well, we're going to get into this like destructive stuff. And then it's trickling down right into his family's small children.
Mhm. Yeah, so the
Wow.
studies show that basically at all ages, people are consuming porn. And we know from other studies that the majority of people on porn sites are young people. That's why there's now all these states in the United States, a lot of the different state representatives are trying to get age verification because it's well known that young people are the people who are there the most. Now think about the ramifications of this. We can go into the addiction piece in a minute, but it's highly addictive. So now you have young people on there becoming addicted without knowing it. Like it's literally the industry is just solidifying the that this will continue into
Right. Well,
generations to
and
go.
that's been going on as far as when I saw it. I mean, when the internet started coming out, porn started becoming a bigger problem, and so it's grown. So there's been people who got addicted as young men, and now are grown men still addicted, and I've had just a little bit of working and helping in anti-human trafficking, and we're seeing that this massive porn addiction, widespread, it's just falling into that, and now sexual abuse and predators, and so we're seeing this societal deluge of problems that have been fed by this.
Yeah, and we can even I know the vast majority of people, the idea of trafficking doesn't relate to them, even though it does. But they're like trafficking, that doesn't really have to do with me, even though it doesn't. We can go there if we want. But my point was going to be that when it comes to social media use, and if you're a person who's going on social media, consuming just images of women, explicit matter, that is then impacting how you show up in the world. And it's changing your interactional style with actual human women. So there's
Yes.
basically 3 reinforcement loops for the average person, including the children and including women now, but women are a little different. We can talk about that. But when like, let's just keep it at social media, but obviously porn proper is part of that issue too, is that now you're reinforcing it. You go on social media, you get hits of dopamine. This is a dopamine dependency we're talking about. You get hits of dopamine from body parts on social media, seemingly harmless, but not. Then, if you've been exposed to porn, there are the habit loops and the addiction and the compulsion piece. So you're on social media, it leads you back for more porn. At the same time, then, it changes the way you interact with people in the world. So there's more lusting. And the lusting, checking people out, it's for dopamine hits. It's not even about the people. People have now become objects because of the pixel aspect. Your brains are addicted to that. So the 3 reinforcement loops are social media, porn proper, and the way you interact with people in the world.
And it's happening all the time. I mean, all you have to do
with everybody, basically everybody.
I'm constantly paying attention all the time, and I'm a protector, I'm a warrior, and I'm watching, and I see men all the time, and I've been watching it for decades. They're checking out women in society. They're watching up and down, and it's become more and more blatant and more obvious. And some try to hide it, but it's there, and that's one of those loops. And then I love how you pointed out in social media, or even any media for that example, any movie, anything. It's going to get those dopamine hits by focusing in on body parts, right? And now, obviously, men are drawn to that. It's just we're wired that way. We're built that way to be attracted to a woman's body.
And evolutionarily, like, okay, let's pretend nobody had phones, right? So evolutionarily, men are wired more visually. They're wired to seek out younger women who have the potential for reproduction, right? Like, that's the evolutionary wiring, but it becomes completely distorted from porn because what you're viewing is a super normal stimulus. It gives the brain excessive amounts of dopamine, not the healthy amounts of dopamine combined
that you would
with
get in a normal community,
a healthy relationship. Like,
yeah.
If there was no phones and porn, then you would be lusting after some of the women who you considered to be at the highest of the food chain for the potential to actually reproduce, to keep your species alive. That becomes very, very distorted.
That's worth emphasizing so much there, that having all this exposure to screens and exposure to all kinds of stuff you're seeing and distorted realities, but it's creating such a dopamine hit and
it is. And porn is really the problem, because it takes healthy sexuality and it flips it. It flips it to that it's all about the chase for more and more higher amounts of pleasure.
Yes.
That's not what healthy sexuality is really about. It's about connection also, and it's about intimacy and vulnerability. And yeah, you're also getting pleasure, which is the point, but it's combined with connection and love. So, that's not obviously in pornography at all. Because people will say to me all the time, like, that I'm anti-sex. I'm like, no, I'm not. That's not sex. I have to bring people back to the fact that what you see on porn is not sex. Actually, I was just on a show that aired yesterday on Jubilee Media, which is a very big YouTube platform. And it was me debating porn performers. And a cool thing that I got them to agree to is that porn sex is not at all the same as having sex within a relationship. They all said, yeah, they love having sex with their partners. Porn is completely artificial. It's work to them, and it's not enjoyable, which I thought that was a really cool takeaway from that experience.
Yeah, that's huge, because even they are disconnected emotionally from the connection. There's no bond.
Yeah, they have to be, basically, like, to be able to get through the work. So,
wow.
It's
That's
so
crazy.
artificial. And then the viewer doesn't know that because their brain's lit up by dopamine. It really does go back to the dopamine dependency.
So okay, so let's. There's so many things I want to hit, but let's say what's happening to the brain, and then let's go from there. The cascade effect into our minds and our lives.
Sure. So I call it the silent tsunami because the neurological dysregulation that happens the first time a person consumes porn is known. Basically, it changes the way that the brain needs dopamine. So you already said it. The vast majority of people find porn when they're young. It used to be 10, 12. Now it's going down to 8. That underdeveloped brain, because brains develop until the age of 28, that brain now is changed within the first one, then the second exposure. The first exposure gets lit up, more dopamine that's ever been put through it. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in a minute, happens. So the brain has to change itself and try to get back to homeostasis, but it actually effectually creates a new homeostasis,
Hmm.
changing it so that now it needs more dopamine. So on the second exposure, it actually releases more dopamine. And this is the hook. Those are the seeds of addiction. But that disruption happens deep in a person's brain without them knowing it. So then, inadvertently, if you keep going back to porn, you're watering those seeds of addiction. So if you never watered it, they might not grow, but most people do because that made their brain feel better than ever. Here's one other thing too is it will get linked to the thing that you're viewing. So a lot of people I work with have fetishes, or it's known to change the arousal template. The more you view a particular thing and the higher and higher the dopamine goes, that becomes the thing that lights your brain up with dopamine. So then we know what happens is the reward center in the brain becomes desensitized, the dopamine receptors. Literally every time you go back, they need more. They're becoming desensitized. It's tolerance building. At the same time, the reward pathways that feed forward to the frontal lobe are decreasing. They're becoming flooded with dopamine, which decreases their function. So in the frontal lobe, that's the area of the brain that controls, well, it's what makes us different from lower level animals, basically. So it controls thinking, impulse control, judgment, socialization, organization, planning, motivation, those motivational pathways. So the brain becomes, over time, it literally deteriorates, and then there's tolerance building, and that's why there has to be more consistency, higher intensity porn. Many of the men that I work with will end up um, going to either paid sex or
Hmm.
infidelity because they
Hmm.
need to experience now to get the higher levels of dopamine. Think about the impact of all that on families. And
Yep.
here's the deal, too. Most people aren't admitting that this is happening within their families. Going back to like how many people is this affecting? We know from scientific studies the vast majority of people, but we don't know the actual impact within homes. And just one more thing before I throw it back to you is that I have a coaching practice. It's a global coaching practice. My everything I do, I have my own app. It's all computer based. I work with people all over the world. I have personally talked to thousands of men. So I have a different vantage point. I
You do.
know the things that are going on in many, many, many homes to an extent that most other people don't. Because people
Right.
think I'm speaking from a point of hyperbole. Trust me, I'm not. I'm not.
Good.
I people tell me all the time, I've never told anybody this, and I thought I was taking it to the grave. And I tell them, I'm very glad you're not taking it to the grave and you're addressing it so you can live the rest of your life the way that you wanted to.
Yep. Yes. Oh, this is so awesome and so important. What you explained is how people easily get into violent sexual encounters, child abuse, and even other bizarre, crazy stuff. It's just like
Mhm.
a drug addiction. It's like any other addiction. It has to keep getting
Yeah.
worse and
And
worse.
I have no judgment. Like it crushes my soul when I work with people. And I think that's why people will come to work with me too, is they know like when I just made a video about one of my clients who I basically made a video begging people not to click that thing that is enticing them because, one of my clients clicked a chat room that enticed him for a while. It had child pornography in it, and it had been monitored by the federal government for a long time. He clicks into it. He's now going to jail. And he's not even into kiddie porn. But the reality is, when you get in there, if that lights your brain up, you're going back for
And
more, even though you don't want
there's
to. And this is why people
exactly.
end up in jail. Child pornography is going to go through the roof because of what you're talking about. Not only is it human trafficking is, increasing because there's demand, but then now people's brains are being hijacked by, these really distorted arousal scenarios that are being put out in pornography that could never have been put out, 30, 40 years ago. Nobody
Yep.
could find it.
And now it's rampant.
That's
It's
why I
everywhere.
half joke that this is now happening to everybody, where 100 years ago, it couldn't happen to anybody besides a person with a harem who was like
Yep.
one person. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The one guy with a harem, he had a dopamine problem, but now everybody
All
has a
over.
dopamine
Right.
problem.
Exactly. And so it changes the dopamine baseline and then starts this cascade of problems that you mentioned so well. So let's lean in a little bit more in particular now, how this starts to affect a man, a father, for example, how he's being a provider and a protector, how he's showing up for his wife and his children. What's the fallout there that you're seeing? Because I'm seeing it too with the
Sure.
men I get to work with,
Mhm.
and you're seeing it even more specifically with this problem.
Yeah, and the difference with what I can see is, in my practice, I offer something called QEEG brain mapping. I can map a person's brain. I can see the areas and the levels of dysfunction and specifically how they're affecting people. I've seen it thousands of times. I actually just
Wait,
completed a study. hmm Tell me, what are you
how?
going to say?
How? No, like how? This
Oh,
is
yeah,
so.
it's
How do you
amazing.
map it?
So I use EEG, which is electroencephalogram. So I can see how a brain is using electrical energy. This is all substantiated in scientific studies too, but not to the regard that I've seen it with pornography. There's fMRI studies for pornography, which basically the findings that I found corroborate those, but extend those findings. So there's two main patterns that men who consume pornography have in their brain. And I've named them easy names. The first one I call strained brain. The second one I call drained brain. So strained brain is a wired and tired brain. It basically, when you're caught up in the cycle of porn consumption, it stresses your brain out and then it fatigues your brain, wired and
Mhm.
tired.
Right.
And it's a chicken and an egg effect because basically now it's creating stress and fatigue. So your brain continues to need to be soothed from the stress part, stimulated from the fatigue part, and you keep going back for more and more self soothing and self stimulation, but you're reinforcing the strained brain. And then it creates a burnout aspect in a person's brain. So let me stop for 1 second and tell you how a person feels when they're in strained brain. They feel stressed, but they feel exhausted too. They feel wired and tired. They feel like they need to go to something externally to take the edge off because basically their brain's lost the ability to calm itself down in a natural way, to shift itself into neutral. And this comes into play when we talk about the next brain pattern. So now a person ends up every day or every other day or 7 times a day going to an external source, porn or social media that is explicit matter, to get those dopamine hits to bring the wired and tired pattern down a little bit. But of course, it just goes back up once the
Right.
dopamine dries up.
Right.
So then what happens is if you keep doing that, your brain will shift into something that I call drained brain. The wired and tired goes down because you're hitting the easy button of the dopamine too much. Your brain becomes flooded with dopamine and it gets stuck in neutral. This is when people have erectile dysfunction that they cannot get rid of. So you can
Mm.
have ED or sexual arousal dysfunction from strained brain, and it's kind of like it comes and goes. If you're struggling with, I call it sad sexual arousal dysfunction because it is sad to me that this is
Mhm.
happening,
Yep.
that then your brain is likely stuck in drained brain. That's what I studied, the brain pattern that goes along with porn induced erectile dysfunction, which we know erectile dysfunction in young men has doubled in the last decade. And men in their 20s and 30s, it's skyrocketing. Most of the people I work with have ED because that's the biggest pain point. And they're not telling anybody. They're trying super hard to be able to perform with their partner, but they can't. And they are struggling in silence. And that's why the main thing I want people to know is if you know you have arousal dysfunction, it's coming from your brain. You can go to all the doctors in the world. They're going to tell you you're fine. and that it's in your head, it's performance anxiety or it's stress. And they're right on that, but that's not the chicken. That's the egg.
It's physiological. It's happening
It's
in the brain.
neurophysiological.
Oh,
It is.
neurophysiological. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, it affects how hormones are made, neurotransmitters are made in cascade. So many men think it's a testosterone problem. Significant number of men are on testosterone replacement. And my question to them is, why? It's not because you're aging. It's because you're depleting your testosterone supply by the same mechanism at play within porn consumption. So if you're on testosterone replacement and you're still struggling with porn or explicit matter social media and or anything else, like you said, you have to think about it. It's coming from your brain and it's affecting. Testosterone is first made in an axis in the brain, then it's produced in the genitals. Like, it's a brain
Yeah.
thing. And I have helped probably thousands now, but hundreds of men. I've only really been on the ED roller coaster or, drive about a year now where I'm like, ED's the hugest pain point here. I have to start telling
Right.
people, if you have ED and you even go to social media or OnlyFans is loaded with married men. OnlyFans and dating apps have more married men on them than single men.
I did not
Mhm.
know that.
Uh-huh.
And I
And
didn't know
think
about the
why. It's
with
not
guys in their
it's
20s and 30s.
uh Yeah, I have a lot of clients, breaks my heart, 20-year-olds. Mhm.
That's wild. And then these married
But
men
my
on
my
there. Okay,
program
why are
is
the married
4
men on
months
there?
long. 4 months later, they don't have ED anymore
Oh,
because
that's awesome.
basically and all my work is measurable, which I think that's super cool. Like, I
Yeah,
do
that's
the
great.
brain map first,
Yeah.
but then when someone joins my program, we can see your brain changing in real time. We see
Yes.
strain brain go down, we see drain brain go away, and that's super motivating, for a person who's had ED for 10 years. But think about the ramifications of this on families. We know less men are getting married than ever before. And so if you just think about the trap this is, you can't get an erection except for with porn, and sometimes not even with porn. You cannot be with a partner, which means now you're isolated and you go back for more porn use, which is locking in the ED pattern. So it's creating a generation of men who will not be able to be with women in real life. That's real. That is a
Yeah,
real
that
statement
that
right there.
ends so many families.
It does. So there's less men. More people are into polyamory, which I've looked at being with multiple people. That's a high dopamine situation. So now people are justifying that. It's just
Right.
excessive dopamine is what people are looking for.
Right. So it's all dopamine driven.
It's all dopamine
That
driven. And this
that's
is the first time in history.
crazy.
Screens do it in and of itself. And there's new books out. The one book out is called The Anxious Generation,
Yeah, that's a great
about
book.
this generation. Yeah, so about how screens themselves will create this dysregulation and this dysfunction in the brain. But then when you go up higher and higher supernormal stimuli, which porn's the very highest. Andrew Huberman, I guess I didn't see it. Someone on my team told me that he just did a Theo Vaughn podcast where he said that porn gives the brain 300% extra dopamine and that
So it's
cocaine is at
huge.
400%.
Right.
Like,
Right.
this isn't like alcohol. We're not talking about, because people would be like, isn't this just kind of like the same as chilling out and drinking? Not at all. This is like chilling out and doing heroin,
And
which
I want
you
to
can't do
emphasize.
heroin with moderation. That's not a
Right.
thing.
Exactly. And I want to emphasize here, like, this is a dopamine thing. Like, so far in our entire conversation, we haven't even talked about right or wrong, right? Of like, oh, it's moral, or that's a religious
Yeah, you
framework,
won't
or
catch me. You won't catch me saying right or wrong. What you will catch me saying is healthy or unhealthy.
right.
And, that's what I'm about. There's no judgment here. This isn't a moral thing. That's why when we enter into discussions about religiosity, I don't even really think it has that's the conversation to have. And I've done this with religious leaders. I know that it's creating a lot of shame. We know this too, that lot of shame, but the shame comes from the discongruency of the way a person is living and the way they want to live up to. I talk about it as divinity. And in my book, it's about the transformational journey of the self that you are right now, with a little s, is the way I put it in the book, a little s self who's using these coping mechanisms and these defense mechanisms, because most time porn use leads to manipulating your partner on accident. It's a defense mechanism, lying, covering up. This changes, relationships and families, which we should talk about, all of those aspects. It creates a lot of shame because you're not being the most divinely inspired version of yourself. And going back to strain brain and drain brain, it creates very distorted thought processes.
Yep.
And so you don't even understand that the way you're thinking is not the way that a healthy brain would think. I have this conversation with my clients, some of them. I've been talking about this client a lot lately. I have a couple clients where they're married, but they've had a girlfriend, a very toxic, just hypersexualized girlfriend for a long time. And
Wait,
then they're
while
thinking
they're married
about
or before they're married?
while they're married.
Whoa.
And then they're thinking about leaving their wife for this toxic girlfriend who they're already cheating on. And I'm like, this is very distorted thinking. You cannot make any decisions right now. Don't make, and of course, I said, maybe you don't want to be in the relationship you're in, but you don't know that right now. You're just dopamine driven. And a healthy relationship will never be the highest dopamine. It won't. It can't. It's called the happiness trifecta. When you have a healthy sexual relationship with your partner, there's lower levels of dopamine mixed with serotonin for joy, oxytocin for connection. It's never going to hit the same as super high levels of dopamine that many men are now accustomed to. So we know from the research,
can't compete. So if you're competing for dopamine, you lose.
Can't compete.
Whoa.
Sexual satisfaction is down in relationships than married men because of porn. Their own body image, the way that they see their partner's body, very distorted. Many of my clients tell me too. They'll use the verbiage. My wife is smoking hot. She's a 9.5. She's a 9.9, but I am not attracted to her. But that's because he's used to consuming porn scenes with performers, actresses who are doing things that gorgeous woman who's emotionally healthy isn't going to want to do.
Right. Wow. What about the other side of it where why else are married men turning to porn? And are you seeing that? Is that happening?
It comes from the link that happens young, and masturbation. We really should include masturbation for all those who are like, I haven't watched porn in 7 years, but in their head, they know they masturbate, 3 times a week to fantasy, because fantasy ultimately is why. So the question, it's because people are escaping their reality to go get that high level of dopamine to numb out. That's what drain brain is. Like, it's the numb feeling that they want, to be taken away from their reality for just a beat, for a little bit. And guess what? Porn's really good at it. And I see that in the brain. It shifts the brain into artificial neutral. But then if you get stuck there, it creates a lot of problems. So that's why in my book and in my program, porn is actually, it's not the problem. It's the solution, but it's creating more of a problem. So it's the chicken and the egg. But creating the life that you want is what I tell people. Not what your mom wants for you, not what your wife thinks you should do. But of course, that should be an interdependent relationship. But you have to figure out, what is it you're here on planet Earth to contribute and to enjoy? And yes, you're allowed to enjoy your life.
Yep.
So find your contribution and become passionate about it. This is the divinely inspired purpose. Get yourself on purpose. And when people tell you can't do it, show them. Or do what I do. I stop telling people what I'm doing. They can watch me do it as it comes out, because people always tell me not to do it because they're fear-based. They tell me I can't do it, which every single thing I've been told that I can't do, from my mom, from my dad, from my husband. That's why I said to him, do you want me to tell you? He's like, no, I'll shut you down. He knows, but it's for fear, fear for me. And I'm like, in my life, I need to leave it all on the floor. On my deathbed, I want to know everything that came my way. I wrote it till the end. That's what I want for people, to find their passion every day they get up, jazzed up, and the day flies by. They would never even want to escape, and they definitely wouldn't want to harm their brains because it's their greatest resource.
Yeah. And is that a factor? Men who lack purpose and drive and mission and a noble aim?
Yes, but a lot of people don't know that until the answer is yes, but people don't fully know that until the fog clears for them. So it might not resonate with your
Right.
listeners.
Because they're
Some
not
of them
thinking
it will.
clearly like you're explaining. I loved how you
Yeah,
explained that.
because
It's like,
they'll be like, I make a lot of money. I've got a great job. My family's amazing. And then my answer to that is yes, except for your brain is flooded with dopamine, helping you to deal with all those things. You can't even know the difference. Like, for example, I have a lot of high performing clients. One gentleman who's a very high level lawyer, executive. He's like, I'm fine. I'm like, no, you're not. You're addicted to porn.
yeah.
But yes, you are performing at high levels, but it's requiring you to self-soothe and take the edge off of your day every day. That is not peak performance. Peak performance is having a very healthy brain. So when you come home at the end of the night, you can be really present with your family. You don't need hits that hit up here at a level 20. You can sit with your family, and a funny joke is enough to
Yeah.
send joy and pleasure through your core. And I've been on my own transformational journey too. Now, yeah, I have 5 children. They're young adults. My youngest is 14, my oldest is 22. And one of my favorite things now is I'll make organic tea, and then I just like sit in this chair downstairs, because if I try to make my family come out, they won't talk to me. But if I'm out and they come around, which happens almost every evening, like just yesterday was Sunday, we ended up hanging out for like 3 hours, just like, so fun and enjoyable, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I don't need, like huge hits. And I did back in the day, like back in the day, my husband would party like it was 1999, I don't need 1999 parties because now my system's regulated. That's what I want for people. On a Sunday, they can engage with their family. Engagement is very difficult for people who have a dopamine compulsion.
Right.
And what I mean by
Right. Because
that
the
is
brain's
if
just
you're sitting around
freaking
with your
out and
family,
wanting huge hits.
uh-huh. And it's because your family actually becomes a dopamine deficit state for you. So like when you're trying to hang out with your family, there's not a lot of dopamine there because the brain's been trained to go to those high levels from the screen. We know this. You're in a dopamine deficit state. The way I talk about it is the 4D cycle of dopamine. You get a dopamine drip before you even watch porn. That's the chase. You have the idea. And I always call it a hijacker idea. I've got an idea. I'll watch porn. Dopamine dripping
That's
already.
tripping.
Then
Yep.
when you start to watch porn, and you have 3 seconds, science shows when the dopamine starts dripping, you have 3 seconds to pivot. And a big part of my program is creating a rock solid pivot plan for the early days so that
Yes.
that starts to drip, you know exactly what you're going to do. And it's all based on neuroscience. It's going to work. So then the idea is, then you're in a dopamine deluge, the flood. Then you're in the dopamine drowning, the numbed out. But then guess what? You go back to life and there would have been dopamine in your work. There would have been dopamine in your relationships, in your family, and in the sexual intimate relationship with your partner. But now there's not enough.
Wow. Crazy.
It's crazy, right?
Okay. Well, okay. I got, so I want to talk about how to start moving away from it, getting over it, and keeping it out of our lives. But first, I want to ask, do you have sons?
Yeah, I have 2 sons. My husband and I both come from families of 6. We're Irish. And then we have 5 children, and I have a bonus son. He was here yesterday too. So we have 3 boys and 3 girls.
Fantastic. Okay. We have 7 children, and our
Yeah.
ages, our first 5 are 22 to 14 as well.
Cool.
So with your
Sweet. So
boys, yeah,
right?
I know all about this stuff. What did you do to help your boys steer clear of pornography addiction?
Okay, now I'm a unique case, but I would encourage everybody to do this anyways. Like, if it wasn't for what happened to me, that experience that I told you, I would have never talked to them because, like, I just probably wouldn't have had the emotional intelligence to do so, like being able to communicate. My parents never talked to me about anything. But long story short, when I pivoted into this work, we talk about porn all the time now. We talk about masturbation all the time. Like in my home, this is just common talk. So I never had to have the talk with them because they heard me saying all the time, like I would come out with like the new
Like,
research I read. And
this happens.
so I think a really cool thing that has happened is my oldest son, he just put blockers on all of his stuff. I never told him to, just preventively. And of course, all their friends are wrapped up in this.
Yep.
So they know better just inherently because of all of our discussion. And they see it playing out with all of their friends. So they just have done all the things that I recommend because I'm always
Yes.
talking about it.
Yep. So
But, what I
learn
would
about it,
recommend
you teach them
is
about it, and then they see
Mhm.
it in their friends. And so it's like,
Yeah, and
mom's
this is
saying
this is
this.
gonna be
Wow.
like smoking or, vaping in today's day and age. I always equate, porn consumption just like smoking was 50 years ago. Everybody smoked. Like, parents would let their kids smoke because they didn't know, which obviously smoking was shown to be highly addictive to cause cancer, and secondhand smoke kills people too. And I equate porn to the exact same. Porn's highly addictive. We know that. We know that it causes ED, which that's, I already explained to you the tragedy there. And it is affecting all of your relationships. We know that
Yep.
scientifically. And when it
Yeah.
comes to
So
families, just to touch upon it for a minute, like how this is really playing out. And again, it's all in my book with stories about how this plays out too, is anger and irritability. Sometimes you're high, sometimes you're low. You're high when you have a lot of dopamine in your system, you're low when you need it. That creates a lot of confusion in a home. Because if you come home and you're ready to, you're hugging your kids and you're ready to party because you just got a dopamine hit, and then 2 days later you come home and you're yelling at everybody and nothing's changed, you become an emotionally unsafe person for your partner and your children. And then, of course, like if the porn use or if the hypersexualizing is more overt, then you're creating intergenerational trauma around this. And we know it doesn't even have to be that overt, and kids will pick up these patterns. But, some dads show their sons porn and say, this is good for you. This is a way to relax.
there's I saw these articles recently. Like there's a large group of people saying no, porn is good, masturbation is good, it's healthy.
Okay. Now, are you ready for this?
Yes.
Okay. There is actually a quite active disinformation campaign around pornography, and active scientists, just like the smoking industry. That's why I equate it to the smoking industry. We know, because that's all been debunked now, that when smoking was at its height, there was scientists in universities putting out research that says smoking's good for you, it helps you relax. Fake science, The same thing's happening with pornography. So part of it is disinformation, and disinformation is different from misinformation. Disinformation is actively saying the opposite of what is true. Now, one way that I know that this is 100% true is that I've been targeted by the disinformation campaign, and they have tried to make a world of hurt of my life. But they've done it to many professionals, including Gary Wilson, who wrote Your Brain on Porn. There's if you Google this, you will find the record and actually all the documents. Gary Wilson put all the documents of all these court cases online for viewers to see.
They
Because
literally went after him.
Mhm. And
That
I'm
is
I'm just hopefully I'm done. Knock on anything, because this happened to me about a year ago. I was the flavor of the year, and
right.
hopefully they've, not that I want them to move on to anybody else, but hopefully they've moved on from me. But it's an active disinformation campaign. And I've seen recent videos with the players that I know of making videos saying, it's really interesting. In my book too, I call my agent, I call the publishing company. My book's published through HarperCollins, major publishing house. I call them, I tell them this thing's happening to me during the editing process, and they're like, put it in the book, make it a meme, because when they go to do it, because the way they do it's really sneaky. So in the book, there's a section on how to know what disinformation is. And one
Mhm.
of the things I saw recently was, what they'll do is go, high-speed internet porn? What's that? Are the pixels sharper? And that's just like taking away the fact that we know that it's the novelty of high-speed internet porn, where no time before in history could you have anything you wanted to view come up and click through 100 tabs. So like that one statement is trying to make it seem so silly that high-speed internet porn has anything to do with the problem, but it very much does.
That's because it's
So
changing the dopamine baseline again.
100%.
Yeah.
You can escalate, very quickly into all these different, people know, I don't have to tell them, genres, different. You can find the person who, the scene with the person like never before. And it's changing arousal templates. Then secondarily, there's misinformation. There's so many people out there that just don't know. Most of the clients I work with, their doctor tells them porn's fine. There's nothing that substantiates it's bad for you, which is not true. There's tons of studies. They just
I
don't
recently saw a
know.
video
They just
from
don't
a
know.
urologist. He was just like, "No, masturbation's good for you. It's good for the body."
Yep.
And all this. That, and that.
And this is what I say about masturbation because it is really important. Compulsive masturbation is a major problem. If you're a person who never watched porn and you really don't masturbate hardly ever, and then you masturbate one time, that's no big deal because your brain isn't conditioned to go back to the dopamine through fantasy. But I already explained to you, the vast majority of people are caught up in the compulsion of all of this. So it's compulsive masturbation. What compulsion means, and this will be a challenge to your listeners, compulsion means that, well, basically this is the scale. A habit starts with use. You start using something. You start using masturbation to feel good. Then it becomes abuse. Now you're masturbating more than you should, or it's increasing, or you're supposed to be at work and you're going to masturbate instead and be late for work. That's kind of abuse. Then there's a bridge from use, misuse, and abuse over to compulsion. Compulsion is you need to do it. So now it's Monday morning and you've got the work week ahead of you and your brain is used to a dopamine hit to get through that work week. So basically every Monday morning you have to masturbate or you will have a rough week. You
So
need it. So it changes from
there.
wanting it to needing it. And then when you need it more and more and more, that's full blown addiction, which to me, compulsion and addiction are basically the same, but when it's really ramped up, and I don't love using the word addiction. That's why I keep saying for men who consume porn, because anybody who consumes porn probably has the seeds of addiction in there.
Because of the dopamine.
But that doesn't resonate with many people. So the challenge is just try to stop. Try to stop masturbating, try to stop watching porn, try to stop going on social media to look at young women, try to stop, see what happens. What will likely happen is you will feel exhausted. You'll feel flat. You'll feel angry. You'll feel irritable. You'll be anxious. You won't be able to focus on your work. Withdrawal symptoms. And when you will feel urges and cravings to go back for more of the thing that's giving you that dopamine. That's how you know you have a compulsion. And of course, there's tests and checklists and all that, but we don't even need a checklist. Just try to do that.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to live in denial of anything. It's like, just try it and just pay attention. Have that self-awareness to know, like, okay, what am I feeling? What am I experiencing here? It's like, okay, there's a compulsion problem.
Yeah. And self-awareness is very low because of the dysregulation in the brain. So again, in my book, I talk about the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence and how they are changed because of porn use. The first pillar is self-awareness. The second is self-regulation. Self-regulation is you get mad or you have a fight with your wife and you feel the need to go use porn to regulate your mood, to give yourself dopamine. Then there's social relationship awareness. This goes down. It all starts with self-awareness going down. So like, going back to that manipulation or that lying, you actually think your wife is attacking you because she asks you if you have consumed porn. You actually think you have to defend yourself because the social awareness has gone down. Or many of the people I work with, very distorted. Many of the people I work with, they can't go out and socialize anymore. They feel so uncomfortable on the inside. That social piece becomes very difficult. And then social awareness, obviously you need it to have social relationship management. So there's very little self-awareness, and those other 3 pillars are built on the self-awareness. So when people are really caught up in it, self-awareness can be really low. That's why journaling, if you journal your experiences and look back at them when your brain is as clear as possible, And, going back to your comment about good or bad, I don't see things as good or bad. I really see things as regulated and dysregulated. And I watch for that in myself too. Like if I'm feel myself getting more and more tired, I know I'm becoming more and more dysregulated. So like, my husband would be like, "You want to go out tonight?" And I'm like, "I'm beat." Because I know if I go out, I'm not going to really have fun because I'm too tired. I need to
Mhm.
take a night and chill. Like I can feel my own levels, which don't really shift that much. They shift a little with fatigue or with working too much or momming too much.
Right. And
But,
but paying
so
attention, you pay
self-awareness can be
attention to your
tricky.
thoughts and feelings and
Mhm.
how that's going. That's so powerful. So with what
And
you're
if you
saying,
journal it.
would you say that the people who we call it an addiction or a compulsion, it it tends to make them less successful overall in life for men?
Um, I think I know that at the beginning of a porn addiction, it can make you feel more successful. So if you're in a place of that, like if I am about to tell you that ultimately it will make you less successful, in the short run, it can really propel you, fueled on high amounts of dopamine to keep going because you use it basically to regulate your mood to keep going. So I
Mm,
know a lot of men feel very successful, like that lawyer that I was talking about. But then it hits a turning point where now you have erectile dysfunction. That's why that's a huge wake up call. If you have sexual arousal dysfunction, your brain is significantly dysregulated. Your success levels will start plummeting in all aspects of your life
mhm.
if they haven't already. So, like short-term success, maybe. Long-term success, definitely not. What usually happens is relationships become strained. Uh, children figure these things out and they are not happy about it. A lot of the people I work with have estrangement from their children because that hypersexuality does translate out into the real world. It can't not. It can't not. It ultimately ends up where you're checking people out. And now you're with your family on vacation and you can't keep your eyes off the waitresses. And your family's looking at you like, what is happening right now? But you can't
Yeah.
stop. They're the dopamine hits, and you haven't been able to watch porn because you're on a family vacation.
So
So,
you're
and
checking
it's
out everybody
extra
else.
stressful if you've ever taken 6 children on vacation. Those are stressful times, so your brain's looking for those hits. So my point is like it disrupts your family dynamics. It disrupts your partnership, your marriage.
Well, that's
It
exactly where I
affects
wanted to
your
go
work.
next is, yeah, let's go into that a
Mhm,
little bit deeper, how it affects your marriage and how it affects your kids.
mhm,
You already gave some great examples there. Like, let's go a little bit deeper. I personally, I've talked to a lot of people on 5 continents. I've not come across a couple with a great marriage that's like, yes, this is helpful to our relationship. I never have. People say it's out there that there's couples that love porn and it's a great thing. It strengthens their marriage. I've never like actually met anybody like that. So how is it affecting
yeah,
the marriage? How is it affecting the kids?
yeah. Well, we know scientific studies show that when porn's in the mix, and this is actually, this study's a little older, I'm sure it's higher, more than 50% increase in heated breakups and divorce. So with porn in the mix, divorce is more likely. And I just spoke on that Jubilee Media show. I just spoke to one of the porn performers about that because she kept contending that people are using it together to strengthen their sex life. And I made the analogy of like you can have two alcoholics who are having just a blast of a lifestyle, but that doesn't make them healthy. That's why when we talk about having healthy relationship dynamics, for me, that's the ride. That's the ride that we're here for, is to be on purpose and to contribute, not just get as much pleasure and escape from the world until you're blind and you can't do it anymore, like.
Right.
So you can definitely have two people who are just having a ton of pleasure with porn, but that doesn't equal the happiness trifecta. I want people to be
Yes.
happy. And I want
Yes.
people to be in flow state. If, for all the peak performers out there, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi he's the father of flow state. And we've seen it in people's brains. I see it with the people that I work with. They go from highly dysregulated to flow state. Some of my clients, it's a 4-month program, like I told you. I have some clients who have been with me for years and they're not working on porn addiction at all. I have one client who put it great. He's like, last year at this time, I was trying not to watch porn. He's like, this year at this time, I'm trying to stay in flow state always. He got to flow state. He's like, this is insane how good this feels. He's like, I never imagined I could feel so good just being with my family. I could feel so on in my work.
Yes.
Like, that's what I want for people right there. And you're missing out. If you keep going to excessive dopamine, you will always need that dopamine. When you regulate your brain, you no longer need it. Everything becomes pleasurable, enjoyable, and highly connected.
Yes.
So to distinctly answer the question, success goes down because it's the chase you want, the chase of more and more dopamine. It leads you away from all the things at the beginning of the journey that you wanted. That's why I ask people, go back to before you found porn. What'd you want to do then? Because brains do get derailed, and more with the younger generation now, because there's 3 kinds of porn addiction that I outline in my book. These are my types. There's classic, contemporary, and then a combined type. So the younger generation, they're all contemporary, very high amounts of dopamine and little young brains. Older people, they found Playboy magazines and then they transitioned into high-speed internet porn. So they went from lower dopamine to higher. And then there's the combined, the people in like the 50s, 55, 60, they have that combined, and then I work with people, my oldest client's 87, and he was primarily a Playboy magazine guy, so there are differences there in terms of what the brain needs. But my point is, with the younger generation, less men are graduating from college more than ever before. More young men live in their family, their parents' home longer and longer and longer. Motivation's down, purpose is down, ability to think and focus is down. Like, we're going to have a generation of men who are floundering around. To me, that's just so unacceptable that
absolute tragedy.
The life is being sucked out of men primarily and more women, but it's still a man problem.
Yep.
And actually, just to speak to that for a second, because I know I mentioned it earlier, is that women, I don't need to tell you this, but science shows that women are learning to be self-objectified. So that's the role most women are playing right now. They're playing the objects of the male desire for dopamine hits, but they get dopamine hits by being externally validated. So it's all about the dopamine hits. So less women are consuming porn in the way that men do. More women are self-objectifying and allowing themselves to be those objects, through social media.
Same thing.
And OnlyFans is a good example
They're trying to
of,
their needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all. And that's how the relationships are really becoming distorted, because now it's a commodity. Relationships are becoming like consumerism. The consumer and the consumed. Women are the consumed, men are the consumer.
Wow.
And young people especially are learning this. And there's so many examples of how it distorts relationships. But, that's changing a lot of things too.
Oh man, you're right. Intimate relationships are commoditized. So sad.
And it's really becoming tricky for, people ask me, or even my son Declan, he's 21. He's like, Ma, it is harder than ever to find a relationship because everybody's hooking up, everybody's into casual sex, everybody's on Tinder, all of his friends. And I'm like, bro, you have to be a top 1% person these days. I started telling everybody this. First time in history, like, you have to be a top 1%er. And it goes back to evolution. We know this. This is Darwinism, which I love it when you take it and you think about it in this respect. Darwin showed that top tier women would choose out of the top tier men. The top tier women in species that are pair bonded would go, and they, out of the top tier men, that's the women would make the choice. And then it would leave the lower level men to be chosen by the lower level women. And I think that's like so awesome, because if you want to change things in your life, and if you don't have a relationship and it's difficult for you to find one, be a top 1% guy. You'll get the top 1% woman because she's looking for it. It's really interesting how we know this. Like, and so there's a lot of studies that show, women want men who are as educated or more. Women want men who are thriving at the same level, and now they're not able to find it.
Yep, exactly. It's a rampant problem. Okay, let's just, we're coming to kind of a close here. What are these steps to get healthy, to get back down to normal dopamine levels where like in my life, like spending time with my wife and kids, like I crazy love my life. And we do cool stuff. We travel all over the world together doing epic things, but like I'm not chasing these big dopamine hits in porn or things like because I feel like I'm getting dopamine hits all the time just because our life is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Well, that's an engaged life. And, that's what I want for people. Like engagement's a really good word. Like, do you feel really highly engaged? Like in my work, my husband's always like, stop working. I'm like, okay, I guess. Like, because I love my work so much. I could do it all the time. Same thing with my family. Then I pivot into my family life. And he's like, why are you making dinner again? I'm like, like, let's go out. I'm like, I love making dinner because everybody hangs out in the kitchen. It becomes 2 hours of just like shenanigans, as we call it, just like it, and it's so fun and lovely. So that's what I want for people. And I always say we have a staycation. We don't travel that much, but I'm like, our life's a staycation. We love all the things that we have going. We do a lot of things together, around here, um, which is really cool. So the steps to do that, it starts with regulating your brain. So that's the interesting and challenging thing about the silent tsunami is like, if you know how a tsunami goes, I told you it starts with a dysregulation in your brain that happened when you were very young, likely.
Mhm.
And then from there, this wave comes up and it builds and it doesn't hit the shore for years later for most people. But we're not reversing the tsunami. The way to reverse it is to seal that crack at the bottom of the ocean floor to regulate your brain again. That's why I think my work is so crucial because I use advanced technology to do it completely
Mhm.
unconsciously for men. So, like, you can do it consciously, but I address the brain at the level of the brain. You don't have to think about it at all. The technology does it for you. But then, of course, I teach you how to do it also. And the things that I teach you is you have to unwire the need for the dopamine. That's the tricky part. That's where my work comes in because many
Mhm.
people can't do that. They have such a
Right.
dependency. They can't go 2 days. They can't go a week. They can't go a month. They cave. So my work makes it so people don't have to cave. Once your brain unwires, then you must not, it's a good idea. You must rewire your brain. It'll unwire a bit, but if you don't rewire it back to the healthy level, then you're always trying to stay away from porn or
Yes.
explicit matter. Like that,
Yep.
my clients, are not trying to stay away. What happens is when you rewire your brain and you set the foundation of the lifestyle that serves it, you protect that foundation moving forward. And I do this in my own life. Like if I get too busy in work and I start to feel stressed, this goes back to the self-awareness. I'm like, I'm stressed. I've got to take some of these appointments off. I've got to get a micro vacation going. I've got to bring myself back to regulation. We teach you how to do that. That's what you need to do. You rewire your brain. You set the lifestyle that continues to hardwire it in for your divine purpose and enjoying your
Mhm.
life. And then you protect that foundation like your life depends on it because it does.
Yes, it does. Well,
Mhm.
I love that. I teach that framework. I haven't used your words. It's unwire, rewire, hardwire, but I
Mhm.
teach the same framework. It's like we
Mhm.
all have those neuro pathways going on, and we just have to reprogram the autopilot
Mhm.
and recreate
Yeah,
that. So you're right. So then it's not you're constantly fighting it. It's no longer an issue because
it's
you've
no longer an
rewired your
issue.
brain. Yeah.
And that's why I tell people if it's still an issue for you, your brain's still dysregulated. Like once your brain is regulated, it is not an issue. And that's why like, people kind of ask me about like 12-step groups and like I do not like the model of like once an addict, always an addict because,
I don't
you
either.
know, a dysregulated brain than a regulated brain. You're a completely different version of
Yep.
yourself. That's why in the
Exactly.
book, the version of yourself you become is the capital S self.
Yep.
So you go
Exactly.
from the lowercase self, which is not you at all. It's this version of you that got trained to go for high dopamine from sexuality. It has nothing to do with sex either. That's why the non-judgment piece is easy. I know it's not easy for a lot of people, but when you see it as the chase for dopamine, it's very easy to kind of take that aspect. It's a
It's
brain thing. It's
it's a brain
absolutely a
thing.
brain thing.
Yeah,
So once your brain
exactly.
is regulated, my clients say it all the time. They don't believe me either, just so you know. Most clients at the beginning, they're like, okay, I doubt this is going to work. But I'm like, I've had this conversation a million times. But then once the brain doesn't need it, people are dumbfounded that they don't
Right.
think about it anymore because
Right.
they've thought about it for so long.
Because they
So
rewired.
once your brain's
Exactly.
regulated, you can heal yourself. Like it's it's possible, and it's probable if you take the steps that need to be done.
I love that so much.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
That's
you
why I'm on a
cover the
mission, because I want
unwiring,
people to
rewire.
know.
Well,
Uh-huh.
exactly. Yeah, it's so
Uh,
so powerful, so proud, and such a good work. Do you cover the unwiring, rewiring, and hardwiring in your book, or is that something you just do
mhm.
in your
Yeah.
programs?
No,
Okay, it's
yeah,
in the
it's in
book
the
too.
book, yeah. Yep,
So
unwire,
if you
all the
could
things
pick,
to do to unwire, all the things. My book's right here. This is the OG version that I got,
yeah,
in the I labeled it and I put in silver marker because I have other ones around here. I don't wanna lose sight of, the actual first one that was printed, you
I
know?
love it. That's so
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, but it's all in there, and there's more things in my program. Like, the program is larger, things had to be taken out to,
yep,
um
of
but the book
course.
is
Yeah,
the comprehensive start. Like, it is a you can you can use the book and succeed. But then if
perfect.
you get the book and you are still not succeeding, your
Go to the
brain
program.
is more dysregulated. You likely need the technology, or, um that's why I tell people, like, you don't actually have to. A lot of people go to therapy. You don't even need to talk about this. Like, discussing it.
Right.
I use the analogy. If you want to get fit, do you have to, like, sit around talking to a therapist to get fit?
No
No,
way.
you have to get a
Exactly.
trainer and
Yep.
start working out. It's
And
just that
and don't even
easy.
talk that much to the trainer. Like, get the trainer,
No,
wait, get in the gym, and he'll tell you what to do to get going.
100%. That's why the
Yeah.
technology, my app, is like a workout for your brain. It's like bicep curls. You don't have to tell your bicep, come on, bicep, get stronger. You just have to do the curls.
So rewiring. I
And
love it.
that is what has to happen here. That's why I think it's a very difficult, like I already said to you, it's very complex. But once you regulate the brain, then if there is trauma in there, you have the capacity now to
To
work
address it.
through trauma with the steps that I lay out. If there's communication that needs to be improved with your partner, which there likely is, you know how to do it. There's steps to do that. Those are the things you do have to improve. But that's what the personal trainer tells you. When you go back out, you got to change your gait, you got to change your posture, those types of things.
Oh my goodness. I love this so much. I if you could pick just one thing that has the best positive effect on a dysregulated brain, what would it be?
hmm
Or maybe the
I've
first thing. I
already,
know there's gonna be a
yeah,
lot, but, like,
I've already basically said it. Like, purpose, like a thing that you are so excited about, because that can be the difference maker. And I think a lot of people, like, going back to my comment, a lot of people think they know what it is, but that's why I say go back to when you were a kid. Like, what did you think you wanted to do? And that'll really help you, because when you anchor into creating the life that you want, there will be no
excellent.
tolerance for the things that hold you back, you know? Mhm.
Teach
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
live
Yeah.
by, like,
And for
just
me,
live
like,
this
just not
extraordinary
to
life.
keep going, but for a long time I was a college professor, and there's a book by Andrew is this the first? No, Stephen Pressfield. Stephen Pressfield, he's a really awesome author. I really love him. This book, like, blew my mind away because it's the idea of shadow work. And, I was the best professor. Everybody loved me. I had the best classes. I felt completely like I'm crushing this. But it always felt like shadow work to me. Like, it always had this little bit of a hole. And I was tenured and promoted. My poor father almost died because I'm like, I'm leaving. And he's like, what are you talking about? Nobody leaves tenured, promoted. I got a huge raise I never saw 1 cent of. I left because I'm like, this is shadow work. And I created my own business. And that's why, like, the fulfillment I have right now, coming out of the security of being off by, 20% of my true purpose, where
Mm,
there is risk, but there's more satisfaction. There's, you know, the dopamine of doing exactly what I want. So that I would love people to figure out, like, are you in a shadow life or shadow work? And if so, how do you get yourself 20% onto what you really want to do, and have the courage to do it, man? Like, you only get one time around here. Let's, leave it all on the floor when you're done.
yes, yes, yes.
Mhm,
Oh,
mhm.
man. Okay, that's perfect way to wrap that up. That was awesome. Okay, where are the best place for people to get your book and your program and to connect with you?
Yeah, sure. On my website, drtrishleigh.com, and it's Leigh. Um, there's a link for the book there, so you can get the book there, but it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, like anywhere you buy books, the book is available. And everything's at drtrishleigh.com. And I explain a lot of more information about not only my work, but all of that. We put a blog post up, a few of them each week. I have a large YouTube channel. So if you want to get started there, it's Dr. Trish Leigh. There's thousands of videos. They all have a brain hack strategy to help you out. So those are two great resources, but you can link to the YouTube channel from my website too.
Yep. I'll put all the links on there in the show notes. And are you on social as well? Yeah, you're on Instagram at least.
Yep. I'm on Instagram. I'm on all of them. TikTok.
Okay, fantastic.
Somebody took a video of me going, porn damages your brain. And it was stitched like millions of times, people doing dumb things. And I'm like, this is the fact that all these men,
awesome.
One guy's got his like helmet on backwards and he's riding his bike backwards. I'm like, bro, you are making my point for me, but it wasn't even my video. Somebody else put the video of me like, I don't know, a couple years ago, and it went viral, like a memeified forever as the porn damages your brain lady.
That's perfect.
Unbelievable. I'm like, these people are proving my point for me, right?
Yep. So what a great way to spread the message. I love it.
Well, and I'm trying to put out content that helps people on all of those.
Good.
It's on all the channels. It's always about different ways to help you understand and have real life ways, brain hack strategies to move forward with what you really want in your life. I want people to get the life that they want and they deserve. And that's the discongruency. When you become congruent, there's no shame. Inside, there's just fulfillment and joy and pleasure.
Yes, yes, yes. Wow. Thank you so much. This is so insightful and so inspiring. Thanks for the work you do.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad to be here.